is everyone doing? Really excited to be with you this afternoon for these short 30 minutes. We have a very special guest with us, Jennifer Stein, and she is going to be speaking to us about family issues and parenting and ways that we really can support our families and love on them in a more meaningful way. So we're really excited to have her. This is also Minority Mental Health Month, so we do want to make sure that everyone is resting and prioritizing their mental health this month. And we also want to make sure we're amplifying this message. So we are asking you to do us a favor and share this message out to your colleagues, your friends, and to your networks, because we believe in empowering those that are around us, and especially our community. So help us uplift this message. We also want to engage with you throughout this fireside chat. So let us know where you're listening from, even if you're watching this later on. We'll be checking comments later on as well. Comment below, like and share. Again, we're really excited to be with you today. And Jennifer, thank you so much for joining and for sharing this space with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited because Jennifer is from Georgia, or at least she's working in the same state as I am. We typically get guests from all over, but not many from Georgia. So I'm really excited for this conversation, Jennifer.
Well, and I love your mission and what you've done with your organization. So, love to see the support you're providing with families.
Absolutely. I want to formally introduce Jennifer as the executive director for Prevent Child Abuse Georgia, and the Mark Chafin Center for Healthy Development at a Georgia State University Research Center. She has more than 2 decades of management experience, collectively in compliance, operations, sales, and nonprofit management. Staying partners with the Division of Family and Children's Services to lead the implementation of the state's child abuse and neglect prevention plan. Additionally, she is the fiscal agent of Strengthening Families Georgia. She implemented and coordinated family support and preservation services along with the region's first supervised visitation center. That's incredible. Jennifer has also scaled the organization to increase its potential and tripled its funding within 5 years and expanded its service sector from 1 to 5 counties. Jennifer, that's amazing. You're doing incredible work out there.
Thank you. That was back in my past position, but I'm blessed now to be at the state working with an incredible team.
I love that, and I think we draw from those past positions, and it really does help us, I guess, have a more bird's eye perspective in our new roles. But I love the work that you're doing. It looks like you have tons of experience working with families and providing or implementing preventive programs. I'm wondering if you can tell us what made you, inspired you to get into this work.
Oh, well, my husband, he started the Special Victims Unit in rural Northeast Georgia in a county called Habersham. And just being on the sidelines of that really inspired me to start serving on the board
Yeah.
of a local Prevent Child Abuse Council called Prevent Child Abuse Habersham. So the unfortunate side of the work that he saw,
Mhm.
I could not believe the prevalence of it,
Yeah.
but also just the respect that he showed the families that he was working with and trying to find help for. So it just really opened my eyes to um, a lot of relatable things as a mom myself,
Right.
and how I look at my friends and family and support system that I have, and
Right.
how easily just decisions that I made, how I could have come to the attention of defects had I not had the support system that I did have in place. So it's been very informative. I wish I knew more back when I was a new mom. I think my children would have been healthier. But I think
I think
they're
all
okay. They're okay adults, so they're doing well.
I'm sure you did a great job. I always say parenting doesn't come with a manual. You don't know, right? And every child is so different and unique. And so it really does require a new approach to every child's. But you are absolutely right. parenting is it's a challenge. And I'm a mom of myself of 11-year-old daughter Genesis, who is probably my boss. And
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, I don't, and I really don't feel like I have done things well all the time. And I've been in this work for many years. I'm thinking um probably going on to 2 decades of working in preventive services. And I'm still learning, honestly. So I appreciate your transparency.
Yes.
Well, I really want to jump into what are the main issues you're seeing with families out in Georgia in your work.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of us, will find these things relatable, and we realize that through it, all of us need the support of friends, family members, a sort of supportive community, because the things that I'll share with you are really typical everyday stressors. That when they build upon one another, it's like a pressure pot. And that's when the dysfunction and the acute crisis comes into play. And so some of these things, when we look at it, is the issues related when families go through breakups. So divorce. There's also the grieving that children go through besides divorce, the grieving that they might go through when they lose a parent at a young age due to death.
Yeah.
Um, that of a single parent household. When we look at the stressors of a single parent trying to find safe, affordable housing,
Oh my God.
and then from there budgeting past that to be able to provide their families very basic and essential needs and resources. We then look at finding childcare. Um, is there child care available in our area? Is it affordable? Is
Yeah.
it available at a time of day that I'm working, that I can access and use when I need it for the job that I do?
Mhm.
Um, I then look at being able to show up every day for our children
Yeah.
physically, emotionally, with energy, excitement,
Mhm.
so that way we can really support them with their growth and the nurturing that they need. Um, I then think about having the understanding of what the appropriate expectations are of our children. Where are they at with their child development physically, emotionally, mentally, and what expectations are we putting on them? Is it appropriate?
Yeah.
And then another thing, which is always a hot topic, and that would be appropriate discipline techniques.
Yeah.
So when we think of all of those and
Mhm.
those relatable family issues,
Yeah.
it is complex and ever changing, and of course, it's different throughout that child's life.
It's so comprehensive. I really appreciate, the picture that you've painted, because when we're thinking about working with families and the common issues, you made it very everyday, right? These are the things that we deal with every day. And I appreciate that, because when we're thinking of things from a legislative and a policy level, we have to consider what these families are dealing with on a day to day. And you've broken that down very nicely for us. You've talked about systemically what they're going through, um, from childcare to housing. Housing is a crisis.
Mhm.
Where I think every state is dealing with a housing crisis, affordable housing, excuse me,
Right.
to childcare deserts in so many places, or childcare just being too expensive or inaccessible for families,
Right.
and how that does play into acute crises and stress and even burnout, that parents may feel, and then how that can lead to dysfunction and neglect and other things.
Right.
Um, Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate, Jennifer. Thank
And
you.
I'm glad you brought up the policy because individuals and communities can only do so much to
Right.
buffer and support families. We need decisions made to help. And the good news is there's a lot of science and research out there available for our representatives that are in the place to make those decisions. So, just encourage them to reach out to those with that lived experience and that are working in the trenches with families to really understand what they're faced with on a day-to-day 24-hour basis.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, you talked about some of these issues like childcare and housing, and you gave a really great solution, and that is engaging with our representatives and raising awareness of what families are going through, especially those that are working directly with families that are on the front lines. What are some other solutions or resolutions to supporting families amid these things that you mentioned?
Sure. Well, I think first, I think all of us, really want to just check ourselves, and not place additional weight on caregivers. We don't need to be critical. We don't need to pass judgment. So I think that's first. But then also, what we can do as a whole is really promote what's called strengthening families' protective factors. This is a research-informed framework. I love your smile. You know about these, and there's 5 of them. Some states add the 6th one, but I'll just kind of go through them with you because they're each one unique and they do something very special. I like to call them bubble wrap. When we think of precious cargo and how fragile it is, however, if we include these ingredients, if they're robust in families, very prevalent, we can really protect that entire family unit, even help those adults that maybe experience some difficulties in their childhood heal. So the first one is called caregiver resilience. Goodness, I was listening to a podcast last night, and the theme was bend and not break. So when we think of caregiver resilience, as we go through life challenges, we're going to have to learn how to bend without breaking. So of course, there's a lot more to that. Then social connections,
Yeah.
moms and dads, grandparents and grandchildren, children. We all need friends. We all need social connections. And so important because it's through those connections that we have that we're building a web of support so we know who to turn to, but we're also building a net to fall back on. And so I think that's a wonderful visual when we think of it. Everybody needs friends. Another piece is knowledge of child development. I think I said to you, the only book they had way back then was What to Expect the First Year. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have these
I
things.
remember that book. I read it.
Right? So with that, we need to know how to support our children. What stage of development are they at? What can we expect of them? How do they grow? How do they learn? And then how can we create that love of learning and nurturing for our children? So there's some things out there when we think of how do we gain knowledge of child development. And a key scientific word we used is called evidence-based parenting. And so you can look into what's available in your communities and families. I'm going to encourage a 2-gen approach with this. Parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, if you are at all involved in that family unit, I would encourage you to take a parenting class, preferably evidence-based, to learn. There are some great things out there to help support us to make those decisions, whether it's discipline related, whether it's child development and what the brain can and can't do right now, and how we need to protect those children online, all sorts of things. And there's even home parenting programs where a home visitor, a parent educator, would come to your home on a regular basis and teach you how to play with your child, how to read to your child, and be that first teacher for your children. One of the 4th things of the protective factors is called social and emotional competence. And this is really all about, we talk about emotions, but we have to talk about healthy interactions, so that way we can help one another's ability to communicate well, how to talk about our feelings and our emotions, teach us how to regulate our emotions. I love the highlight that you brought about for this month. What can we do to be there for one another and to help teach them how to regulate? I'm still learning. What do I need to do to help me regulate so I can show up to be the best version of myself? And then how do we keep friends? How do we build relationships, and how do we keep healthy relationships? So that's all into that one. And then the 5th one is called concrete supports. And that's really all about linking each other to supportive services and resources that help us address the needs that we have. And we need access to concrete supports throughout our entire lives. There is no shame in reaching out for help. And so it shows a lot of maturity to know when we need to lean on other people or when we need to look at what resources are available in our community. Whether that's helping pay for a utility bill, or maybe that's realizing that I need to grow in my social emotional wellness. And so maybe therapy would be a good approach for me. All sorts of things there for adults and children that we're helping raise.
This is really, really holistic, and I'm listening to the 5 areas, which I want to just recap: was resilience, social connections, knowledge of child development, social and emotional competence, and concrete support. And I love how all of these are really undergirding the family unit and giving them the tools needed to be able to succeed. It's not coming from a condescending, judgmental, but it's really undergirding them.
Mhm. Absolutely. And, some of the terminology we hear out there in today's day and age is strengths based,
Yeah,
right? And I know what I need. And I know, but sometimes I need somebody else within my family and my support to tell me, what am I good at? So that way I can lean into that and again, find those strengths from our family, our community, our neighbors, so that way together we can really build strong families.
and I love the emphasis of community over individual, because I truly believe when you're raising one child, you need an entire village to do that.
Yes.
Um, you really need that social support. And sometimes I think culturally, as people, I'm thinking of, I'm a person of color, I'm an African American woman, we tend not to rely on our social supports because we were always taught you got to be independent, you got to be strong, you got to do what you got to do. You just got to do it. You got to take a licking and keep it ticking.
Yes.
Um, and so these are the cultural things that we've grown up with that does keep us from reaching out to those supports and that support
Mhm.
system.
And I like how you said that, because when we think of how we've all been brought up differently, how important it is to keep our culture as a part of us, and honor how culture plays into how we parent. And so, that's where that community can really help you navigate that together.
Absolutely. If you can also give us any intersectionality or correlation between family dynamics um, and trauma, can you maybe speak a little to that and what you've seen in your work?
Sure. One, super duper complex, right? When we think of families, when we think of relational dynamics, when we think of how all of these things play into and can sometimes cause trauma. So I'm going to use the visual of a tree. Those of you that are in the industry, you may have heard of the pair of aces. And so when we think of a tree, we we don't expect it to grow until it's into its full potential if we don't water it, if we don't feed it, add nutrients to its roots, protect it from harsh environments. When a new tree is planted, a lot of times you'll see those stakes in the ground with some tethers, so that way it can stand the force of strong winds that might come its way, whether it's rain, whether it's snow, sleet, whatever it might be. Um, we have to understand how care and to improve optimum healthy development and what's entitled to that. And then also recognize that if that's disrupted, if we do have a hurricane that year, if we do have a bad snowstorm, and of course, what that does is possibly disrupt that tree's ability to grow into its optimum potential without some sort of support, without some sort of resources and additional nurturing. And so we'll then kind of turn this over and think of how complex our environments are, how complex relational dynamics are. And all of this is where a child is born into these environments and relationships and dynamics. And so we know today those things that could be difficult are called adverse childhood experiences. And so, with that, those can disrupt a child's ability to grow into their given potential. And so, what we want to do is recognize that these experiences exist. Um, and what are some of these that could affect us both physically and emotionally all the way through our adulthood? Um,
Yeah.
are things such as living in poverty, um,
Yeah.
possibly living in violent communities where people don't feel safe to go outdoors in the evenings or even during the day,
Yeah.
homelessness, um, you know, uh, racial disparities and discrimination. We think of divorce, or just where children are living up in two single family households. Um, Families that maybe children are experiencing family violence, maybe not physical family violence, but emotional control, power there. Of course, there's the physical, sexual, um, abuse that children unfortunately still experience in today's day and age. But there's also the emotional, and then there's the neglect. Sometimes it's medical neglect. And so all of these things, can drastically affect the growth of that child for them to reach adulthood and be their very best. Um, and so I share all this with you because even if a child was raised by somebody that maybe experienced these things, maybe they had mental health issues or they were working through recovery from substance abuse, there is still hope. And we
Yeah.
call this healthy outcomes from positive experiences. And a lot of the work that you're doing from your organization is related to this. And I love that because we know today that our brains can heal, that our brains can build new synapses, all of those fancy
Yeah.
terms. But essentially, we can heal from the scars that we experienced, whether they're emotional or physical, we can indeed heal. And sometimes
Yeah.
it takes just one person invested in that child's life that smiles when that child walks in the room, no matter what's happening, that shows up time and time again to put that child first. And so we really can build communities, neighborhoods, and families that are surrounded with these positive interactions, these positive opportunities. And it doesn't need to cost a lot of money because we have parks and recreations, and we have nonprofits, and we have caring mentors that really want to be there to help support families and caregivers. So I know that there's a lot involved there, Shanequa, so I'll hand it back to you.
No, I love how every response is so comprehensive, and you really do a great job at hitting every aspect of it. You talked about the analogy of the tree, and you talked about child diverse experiences. I think I remember the first time I took that survey was at a workshop so many years ago. It could have been with the Administration of Children's Services in New York, and I think I was like checking yes on every question. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Right.
So it's eye opening. I always encourage any parent um, or individual to take the survey because it sometimes we don't realize that we were living in dysfunction or that we've experienced some level of dysfunction because it's normalized in our cultures. And so I love the fact that it's raising awareness, but it's also bringing hope. And I think that's what it really is about when we're thinking about preventive or preventing child abuse, preventing child neglect, is what are the ways that we can support this family unit to healing? Because a lot of the families that are in the system typically are dealing with a lack of hope or hopelessness. Um, and so giving them hope or helping them towards that pathway of healing so that the family unit is restored, I think is really the way that we need to be pivoting all of our efforts and initiatives.
Sure. And you'd mentioned, the ACE survey. done by Kaiser Permanente, that whole study. And I just encourage people that when you take it, and I'm glad that you're in this industry, Shanequa, because as you were checking those boxes, I'm glad that you know, because you've had a lot of training, but there is hope. And that is a number. It does provide awareness, but it, besides it saying, okay, this happened to me, I experienced these things, but it doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to define who we are as caregivers and parents or friends, or where we can put our time and energy to move past that, to really heal, because this life is precious. There is so much purpose that we have, that we're here to do and to give. And so I hope those that might be listening really understand that, even though something may have happened to you, it doesn't define who you are and who you can become.
That's so powerful. Absolutely. And I think that is where, the hope comes in. It may have happened, but it does not mean this is the way your life has to be. You can take power and control over your life. And for a lot of families, I'm thinking of so many families I used to work with when I was in preventive
Mhm.
work. Um, I think sometimes when you're dealing with the system, we have wonderful people like you, Jennifer, but not everyone has that same paradigm or mindset. And sometimes experiences with the system are not so pleasant,
Right.
and they are very traumatic for families. Um, and so it's almost a dichotomy, because you're trying to help families heal, but it's sometimes a system that has traumatized families bringing the healing, and it becomes like, how do I receive that?
Right.
um, and so I think we got a lot of work to do across states. We have to redefine and reimagine what preventive services looks like.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's changed since I've been on the ground, boots in the ground, but I can think of many stories where um, I've advocated for clients that should have received help and some type of access or support,
Mhm.
but instead, the agency was more focused on removing
Right.
children from their home when it was not imminent danger, and that sometimes does happen, and that's another conversation that we can't get into. But I think we have to acknowledge it,
Mhm.
because it's the reality of a lot of our families. And how do we restore that
Right.
trust back?
And I think, one of the things, to reassure those that are out there that maybe need some help, that maybe need to know where to turn to, um, there is what's called the National Family Support Network. You may have heard of the term what's called family resource centers. So, in the
Yes.
state of Georgia, there's the Georgia Family Support Network. Prevent Child Abuse Georgia also has a formal council structure, and these local councils provide direct services. And one of the things that I loved about the National Family Support Network is they have standards. And those standards are all about the quality of care and how it's going to be family centered and supportive of families. And picture, the idea of, what can I do to help you? And then I'm going to walk alongside of you. I'm not going to turn away from you, and we're going to navigate this together. And so, I would encourage those that are listening that maybe understand that, what, I need to look into this. There is opportunities for me to learn and to provide, to find that support that I need. Um, and so I would encourage you to look at a family resource center that is in your area, and know that if you go to one that's part of this National Family Support Network, or Georgia, the Georgia Family Support Network, that you're going to be treated with quality care and with programs that are evidence based. And so just be open minded and willing to make that first call, and to look into what's available for you.
That's absolutely very helpful, Jennifer. If there are any families right now that may be struggling and may want to reach out, but they're probably a little resistant or haven't quite bought into the idea yet. Are there any words of encouragement that you can provide to those parents and families?
Well, there's the helpers wherever you live. And finding those helpers, you're going to find somebody that's not going to judge you, that's not going to shame you, that is going to really listen to you. And so be open to know that the helpers, these nonprofits that are out there, um, they they are there to support you and to listen to you, and to just, to make that call or to make that text. We have in Georgia what's called Find Help Georgia. It's actually a mobile app. It can link individuals to the resources that they're looking for. So just know that is there for you. You can call, or you can use the mobile app and self-resource, but there are helpers in your area. And just know that they do want to help you and they don't want to judge you, and they're not there to shame you about the circumstances that you're in.
That's so incredible. And I believe that that has encouraged and inspired some parents that are watching, or will be watching later, that there is help out there for you, and there are resources that you can access. And there are people that are willing to give you the care that you deserve, and that you need. I love that, Jennifer. And I really appreciate you. And I thank you for the work that you're doing. Certainly, I know it's not easy, but you are really helping us to reimagine what it looks like to really build up and support our families. And I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And in closing, how can families reach you, or agencies reach out to you if they want to get in touch with you?
Certainly. Well, Prevent Child Abuse Georgia, pcageorgia.org is our website. If you're in the state of Georgia, we have a lot of variety of initiatives that are ongoing. And then also, of course, if you want my email, in case you want to speak directly to me, it is jstein@gsu.edu. And we welcome you as a community member, as a professional, as a parent, to get involved. Your voice is crucial and important for us to improve what we do.
Oh my goodness. We need to clone you into multiple people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Stein. And that's how you can reach out to her, if you want to reach out to Mrs. Stein directly. That's her email. We know that this message has been very empowering for those that have watched. Do us a favor again, like and share this, especially if you are a social worker or you're one of frontline workers working with families. We want to get this message out. If you're a parent, remember there's hope for you. What you went through does not define who you are or your future. You can turn it around and take back your personal power and change the narrative. Again, we love you all so much. We appreciate you for your support. Don't forget to like and share this message, and stay tuned for next week's talk. Thank you. Thank you.